Do you consider yourself a strong mother? Would your children say, yep, my mom is a strong woman? And if you're honest, you can rate yourself and say from 0 to 10, 10 being strong, 0 being weak, how would you rate your motherhood? More importantly, how would your children rate you? Would they say, yep, mom is a strong woman, she's a 10, she's a 0, she's a 5? And I think it's an honest question we have to ask ourselves, because if we are going to raise strong children, then we have to ask ourselves, how strong are we as a mother? Today, we are going to break down Charlie Kirk's understanding of a healthy fear that our children ought to have for us parents, for us mothers. My name is January Donovan. I'm the founder of the Women's School, where I teach women how the mindset and skill set necessary to flourish in every arena of our life so that we can truly contribute truth, beauty, and goodness in this world. So let's jump right in. Charlie Kirk here is having a podcast discussion on the importance of being a strong parent that enforces a healthy fear. Now, let me just tell you a quick story, but recent story, I think, that where this, I think, can really kind of resonate in your heart. I have 8 children, and one of my children came up to me and said that one of my middle children, and I try to be vague because I want to respect my children and privacy. She said, Mom, I heard one of X-child's friends cursing in the bathroom. And these are young children. They're not even teenagers. And I know that from my perspective and from my daughter's perspective, this is something that obviously we hold as a standard, that the language that we use in our home is so critical because our words is a form of leadership. And so we hold ourselves accountable to the words that we use. And so she brought this to my attention and I said, well, okay, is this accurate? Is it true? She's like, yeah, Mom, I heard it myself. I was in the bathroom. And so I asked my daughter who's friends and she said, yes, Mom, I've heard them. They do it. And I don't know why they do it, but they somehow think it's cool. And these are good children. I think they really just are unaware and maybe perhaps need some training information on the importance of using appropriate language. These are not bad kids. These are good kids. And good kids can get in trouble because they lack training. That's what we offer in the Women's School. I think it's just awareness that we get ourselves into trouble simply because we don't have the tools or the skills to actually know what to do what's right. And so I asked my daughter and I said, one of my teenage daughters, I said, Pia, can you give me a perspective on what you think? Why is this happening? Why do you think these children who come from really good families that are very devoted and very, I think these are good children. Why do you think that these children feel the need that it's appropriate to curse and think that it's cool? And without literally skipping a beat, she said, oh, Mom, it's simple. The mom's too nice. And it was not a response that I actually expected from her. Pia is my 15-year-old. She's quite wise. She's very observant. So, I often ask my children their perception, their perspective, to harvest data and to kind of also learn where they're coming from. And I also think that I learned so much from my children's perspective. So I'm always trying to harvest by asking them questions. And I honestly didn't think that was the answer that she was going to give me. But when I thought even further about it, I think that's accurate. I think that these parents, and including myself, we are doing a million things a day, and we are trying to do the best that we can with the limited tools that we have. And I think often we are ill-equipped to manage just the micro day-to-day circumstances, and either we're too sort of, busy to think about it, or we're unaware of the importance of it. Or what I think I want to talk about today is that our children do not have a healthy fear of justice, of us, but also of a sense of justice. And I think it's because we are almost a little too nice. So let's listen to what Charlie Kirk has to say and just jump right in, because I think it's a great insight, and then we'll break it down. And I'm going to offer you the 5, I think, critical points that we can harvest from being weak mothers and the importance of actually how to be a strong mother for such a time of massive confusion where we all universally desire to raise responsible and healthy, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually healthy children. So let's just jump right in.
Very, very important point. Did you ever fear that if you did something wrong, your mother would, quote, kill you?
My mom would beat the brakes off of me.
I think this is, for me, depending on what generation you are, spanking was the norm. I think right now some people are traumatized by spanking. I personally feel as though, well, I probably needed it. I still remember the emotional shock I received from being spanked because I lied. And, you have the belt. And I think, yes, it could be traumatic and we can go that route. But I think the bigger point is that I feared my parents. I feared my parents to a point where I wanted to make sure I did not do wrong. And I think we have to ask ourselves, does our children have a healthy fear in our relationship that they want to do what is noble and what is right? Okay, let's continue.
That's biblical. Now think about
Don't
this.
spare the rod.
No, this is very important, that kids that do not fear the retribution of their parents
Are wild boys.
Exactly.
So, where does our children learn respect for authority? Now, because authority has been misused and abused, whether, clergy, whether it's authority over organizations that have abused. So in America, at least, there is a big, I would say, resistance against authority. And I think it's almost as a bad word. However, authority is essential for order. Think about it. If there's no order in our home, then there's just chaos. There's no standard. There's no sense of authority. And the authority are the parents and say, these are the standards. You clean up after yourself. You make your bed. You brush your teeth. And it's not just sort of whatever you feel like, whenever you feel like, because we fear this sort of sense of authority. There has to be sort of a healthy response to authority. And because of our history of authority, that's my way or the highway parenting, we've kind of gone to the radical sort of extreme where it says, well, whatever you want. Almost this idea of, the child leads, right? We have this idea that we want to make sure that the children are respected to a point where they're now calling the shots in our family. And I remember one of friends, family, and I was talking to just families. I'm trying to be vague here. And the daughter, who was 3 years old, decided to say, we're in the middle of a Christmas party. And the daughter says, I want to go home. And this was a Christmas party that we go once a year. And it's amazing because we haven't gone together. And so she just, in her emotional state, because she didn't get what she wanted, she said, I want to go home. I think she was maybe 4 or a little bit older. And so the parents like, oh, you want to go home? So let's just go home because that's what you feel like doing, when it's really kind of put a damp in the Christmas party, because all of a sudden this family picks up and go because the daughter felt like she needed to go. She's 4. And I don't know the circumstances, nor am I in a position to judge. I don't know the whole situation. I'm only pointing out that the importance of us being aware that our children are also not leading the charge because they're incapable of managing their mind and their emotion, and that there's a healthy authority that is not, these radical extreme, but rather authority that it's based on respect, that obedience based on a love, at least in context of family life. And I think that we have to almost reconsider how we are as parents becoming a victim to society's whatever you want, whatever you feel like. Children need to be respected to a point where they're now disrespecting parents. I mean, how many times do you see children raise their voice at their parents or maybe roll their eyes at their parents and assume that this is okay because we've normalized something that I think is not normal, which is a lack of respect for mothers, a lack of respect for parenting. And so as women, we have to ask ourselves, what skills do we need to develop to make sure that our children have a healthy respect for authority? Because if they don't have respect for authority, they are going to have a hard life. There's, you have to respect the law, you have traffic, there's laws in your job, you need to be there on time. And if you're not there on time, there's consequences. That's just part of creating a society that flourishes. Otherwise, you have anarchy. So when our children don't have any respect for authority because we haven't given given to them the opportunity to do that and modeled for them a healthy reverence for authority, we actually we're preparing them to feel entitled in a world and also feel like a failure or feel frustrated because things are not going the way they want it because they've been used to doing that in their own home and it's all they know. And then now they go to the real world where there is authority, there is sense of order, and they are either, rebelling against it, or they're just blaming other people because their life is not the way they want it because they have to follow a certain order in life. And I think that we don't offer, it's an injustice to their future. So let's continue.
They're wild. And the scriptures say this repeatedly, which is that if you do not fear the justice of your parents, then, for example, if you talk to kids who didn't do drugs growing up, you say, why not? Oh, my mom would kill me.
Who are you going to fear? If you don't fear your parents, who are you going to fear?
Yeah, you should fear God and your parents. And by the way, they're substitutes for each other in the sense that the commandment to honor your mother and father so you belong in the land of which you're in is the test. If you cannot honor your earthly parents, you cannot honor your heavenly father. This is
Okay, so this is just a reality that we have to think about for parents who say, you know what, I do want my children to live a moral and faithful life. At least for me, I was even having a discussion with my teenage child, and I said, I'm obligated to offer you a pathway to continue to grow in your moral life, in your relationship with God, because not just for my sake, but for your sake. And I was having this discussion recently. I said, you're not going to be happy and fulfilled without, understanding that someday we all die and that we have to go somewhere, and that we are living a life that's not just for ourselves, but also actually to contribute value in the world, because ultimately it's in giving that we receive, and that fulfillment comes from our life of contribution. And so I was sort of explaining this to him, and I think that a healthy fear of, mothers and father also is really the foundational healthy fear that is necessary to fear God. And I'm not saying that this is a walk in the park. I'm saying, are we aware of our ability to be strong mothers, that our children have a healthy fear in who we are? And I think it goes back to the story I have in the very beginning. Good mothers, simply unaware of the necessary, I would say, strength and accountability that we have to offer, and that maybe we're not aware of, but it's diluting our children's capacity to live a life of excellence, which is ultimately going to make them happier individual. Aristotle brings it really simply, is that virtue is a life of excellence, and excellence is actually what's going to lead to happiness and greater fulfillment, which is what we universally desire for our children, but it is also what we universally desire for ourselves. And so we have to ask ourselves, how strong are we as mothers that we are actually giving our children a sense of a healthy fear of authority in the way we command and communicate ourselves. So here's 5, I think, points that I think is very important. Number one, I think that a healthy fear in your relationship is, I would say, necessary for you to raise the standard of their character, right? If your children are going to roll their eyes, if your children are going to not pay attention to you, they're not going to listen. They're not going to be able to have the humility or the strength to do that outside if they don't develop a healthy fear of that in your own home. So number two, how does that work? Then they need to be able to respect you. If there is a healthy fear, and when I say healthy, it's not fear because I said so. A healthy fear is rooted in respect, obedience, and love, which means that you are also a very respectable woman. The words that you use, it's every little thing. Do you honor your word? And that's a skill in itself. Do you work diligently? Do you go above and beyond? Do you respect the way you talk about other people? These are ways that our children are watching us, model respectability. When our children can say, no, my mother doesn't ever lie. My mother always tells the truth. My mother is, you don't want to mess with her. She's very kind, but you also don't want to also be rude to her because she's going to hold you accountable. That's what we want to achieve with our children, is that they respect us because we respect ourselves. If our children hear us criticize ourselves to a point of, I'm FAT, I am ugly, I'm horrible, I'm just not good at this, that lessens their capacity to respect us. So our ability to honor our value and respect ourselves and speak to ourselves in a manner that's honorable is crucial in their capacity to understand healthy authority, in their capacity to also respect us and respect themselves. And so this is not one skill, but rather compounding skills, which is what we offer and teach in the women's school. We need compounding hundreds of skill set to actually live a virtuous life, to actually live habits. And this is why I create distinctions in the women's school of, okay, that's a great habit of, thinking well, a habit of, being respectful seems daunting. It feels like, okay, I have to build that habit. Why? Because it feels so big. And most of the time, like the habit of, going to bed early, right? Well, that habit of going to bed early, right, so that you can do more, presupposes you know how to build a routine, presupposes you know the skill of saying no to yourself, presupposes that you know how to manage what you eat so you can sleep better. There's so many skills that's necessary to actually build habits. So that's why skills to me is an attainable model, because skills is defined, which we find in the women's school, is our ability to do something well. So if we know how to say no to ourselves well, if we know how to build a routine well, if we know how to, speak well of other people as a skill set, then it's easier to build a habit of, kindness, of routine. So it's important that as mothers, we build skills to help us actually be respectable mothers. Number 3, we have to create a healthy fear that's rooted in logic. What do I mean? If I go to my son and say, because I said so, if I go to my daughter because I said so, that's not a respectable and honorable way to command, I would say, healthy fear. That produces rebellion. Are there sometimes our children are not going to understand? Yes, and I always say maybe once or twice a year, I say, because this is what mom says and you don't have to understand it. But it shouldn't be the norm. It should be that we help our children logically process their highest good, which means that we have to build the skill of casting, cause and effect as a way of developing a habit of processing what's our highest good. So for example, okay, if you do not continually and consistently have a clean hygiene, then what's going to happen? People around you are going to not want to be around you, because who wants to be around that stinky? And then your boss is not also going to be around you, because who wants to be somebody who's, stinky? I'm just giving an example, or bad breath or whatever, right? Because we're developing sort of this integrated human being. And so you're casting a vision for them and then telling them a story of the cause and effect of their decision. So it's not just because I said so. It's like, well, let me just paint this picture for you, sweetie. And that's a script. Okay, let's fast forward 10 years from now, you've got a boss. Let's fast forward, 5 years from now, you're dating somebody. What are the cause and effect of that, behavior? Let's fast forward 5 years from now. What would be the consequence if you don't know how to study what you ate and how you feel after what you ate? These are things that we need to do a better job as a skill set to story tell, to story sell. When I'm saying story sell, we are selling a life of virtue, a life of skill development, a life of order, a life of fulfillment. So as mothers, that's got to be something we have to continually develop, the skill of story selling to our children, painting that picture. Number 4, we also need to really think of how we are inspiring our children, because inspire is to breathe life. So when we want to give them a healthy fear, like for example, I'm inspired by my teacher, Erica. She's an incredible teacher. I'm actually taking my master's right now. And because I'm inspired by who she is and what she's doing to better this world, I am more open to listening to her directives, her authority. There's sort of this healthy fear of, I want to do good because I'm inspired by her life and I want to not sort of this prove or please, but I want to be better because she's so inspiring that her life makes me want to be better. And we have to ask ourselves, 0 to 10, how inspiring is our life as mothers to our children currently? And if the answer is no, 0 to 10, we do a lot of metric development in the women's school. Why? Because it's the fastest way for us to improve is to study ourselves. And so we have to know our starting point. And our starting point is often metric. 0 to 10, how inspiring are you to your children? If you were going to say, I'm a 5, let me ask my daughter how inspiring I am to her, 0 to 10. Now, let the truth hurt, because the truth needs to hurt sometimes in order for us to move us into action, into doing something better. And it says 2, oh my gosh, then what do I do? Now we have 2 options. If our children are not inspired by who we are, or we don't feel like we're inspiring to our children, then we have to ask ourselves, well, this is it. This is as good as it gets. Or we can say, you know what can I do as a mother to inspire my children to have more life in their life, right? Because inspire means to breathe life. And I think, questions produce great result. The quality of the questions that we ask ourselves determines so much of the quality of life that we actually live, because we're asking, the more we learn to ask the better questions, the more we can actually seek truth. So with that in mind, okay, let it sting. It's a 5. It's a 2. Oh, wow, it's a 10. Let's honor that. Let's honor our journey of saying, wow, what about my life that's so inspiring to you? I'm so grateful. Or if it's a 2, what can I do now to improve my life to be more inspiring to my children? Now, what does that mean? It means that we have to have the humility to say, I've got work to do. And I think that's a beautiful place. Humility comes from the root word humus, I think I'm saying that right, which is rich, dark soil in which all things can grow from. And I think that's beautiful, because without humility, nothing can grow. And there's a book called Mindset from Carol Dweck, which I think it outlines this fixed mindset and growth mindset, which I think is a beautiful language that gives us I would say an awareness of our capacity to be, to be constantly growing, because that's what makes us inspiring to our children. At the end of the day, when we're inspiring to our children, there then is a better chance for us and our children to develop a healthy fear for authority based on how we are living our life. And point number 5 is that in order to do this, then we have to be continually developing our skills. Skill development is something that we as mothers ought to busy ourselves. Why? Because first of all, we can't give the skills to our children unless we possess it. Now, I can tell my children, go pursue your dreams, but if I don't know how to dream as a skill set, it doesn't matter what I say, it matters how I show up for my child. If I tell my children, be kind, but I'm not kind to myself because I don't have the capacity to know how to speak, to myself well, then you're going to wonder, why is my child insecure? Or if I tell my children, you need to hold your teacher accountable, you need to hold your friend accountable, but I don't know how the skill of holding somebody accountable and communicate effectively, they're not going to learn it, Well, they could learn it from somebody else, but there's a better chance of them learning that at home. And I think we are the first teachers of our children, which is why it's so important for us to see ourselves as strong mothers and have that self-image of strong mothers, because we don't want to raise weak children. Therefore, we have to ask ourselves, in order to raise strong children, then we ought to be strong mothers. And what does a strong mother look like today in a world where there's a lot of distraction, there's a lot of devaluing of what women is, and also there's a lot of children that feel entitled about how they feel, and there's not a sense of objective truth that's rooting our culture. And we are surrounded by this idea of whatever you feel like, whenever you feel like, is the model. And I think that wreaks havoc, because who can do whatever they want, whenever they want, and actually feel happy and not wake up one day and realize I've ruined my life? No one. We have to have a sense of doing what is righteous, what is right, what is excellent, and not this idea of doing whatever you want. But it's also not, you can't ever do what you want, right? This healthy sort of medium. And so I want to just challenge you as mothers to really reimagine what true strength of a mother looks like in your current life, and then have that humility to be able to look at yourself and say, I've got a chance. I've got a chance to make things right. I've got a chance to go before God and say, well done, my good and faithful servant. You have raised healthy, strong, resilient children that are continuing to bring good in the world. Because the alternative is that weak children wreak havoc in our society. If they're incapable of saying no to themselves, if they are incapable of doing what's right, then they will actually be a contributor to ruining society. Now, it could be that we're just really trying to do, what's good by being kind to our children, but sometimes being kind to our children where we're allowing them to walk all over us does not raise healthy citizens that's capable of having the courage to say no to what's bad and what's evil and doing what is right. So it is imperative that we understand the importance of our strength as mothers for the strength of our culture. And without that, our society will continue to deteriorate into this mayhem, which I think we are in there. But the good news is that I think that our culture right now is seeing that a culture void of morality, of truth, is unsustainable. The idea that women can do whatever they want, whenever they feel like, is no longer as attractive as it used to, because we now have data that it doesn't work. And so if you truly feel that you want to be able to contribute good in this world by who you are, but also your children, then we have to do our part to become students of ourselves, to study our children, to grow and become better stewards of our talent and acquire skills that allow us to become, strong mothers in a culture where men and women have been weakened. If you are interested in growing your skill set and creating a real new self-image of a strong mother, learn more about what we offer in the Women's School. Our vision is simple. We want to create a school. I'm sorry, we have a school. We want to create a movement where women are studying and growing together towards a life of excellence and human flourishment, so we can become better stewards of truth, beauty, and goodness in the world. That's what we offer in the Women's School. And I think it's time for us to not just, watch the world go into sort of this immoral journey. We now have to take ownership in studying ourselves and studying together. And that is the new movement that we are building in the Women's School. If that interests you, follow us here, subscribe in our channel, but also join our movement and join our classroom in the Women's School so you can be part of the solution in how to raise strong mothers for such a time as this. My name is January Donovan, founder of the Women's School, and I truly believe that you are created for such a time as this to bring truth, beauty, and goodness in this world.